So, you guys know how last week on the live stream for the Dragon Hunter, some of the most exciting stuff we heard about wasn't even Dragon Hunter specific stuff, it was just general changes that are coming to the Guardian. Well, Robert G managed to throw in something pretty awesome for the Reaper as well, which we heard about this live stream. I'd love to talk to you guys about. We now have everything about the Reaper, of course, numbers are subject to change, but the general idea of the skills are all in place. We've seen many of their animations and where the Reaper really will fit. I'm going to talk to you guys about exactly what the class can do, plus a couple of other little things. First of all, I would say these streams are getting a lot better. Now, we did have a crash, and there is still some serious awkwardness going on, but the way that they're now demoing stuff, the tooltips we're getting on the screen, they're even showing tooltips for related skills. So at one point, Robert was talking about synergies with the new Reaper Condi transfer shout, and corruptions like Corrupt Boon and things that Conda you. And while discussing this, the tooltips were right there up in the top right. It's actually getting really good. We're getting longer videos, so devs don't feel like they're having to rush while explaining themselves. It's just been pretty much fantastic. Really, really fun stream. It was even nicer to see that some of, at the end when we got some demonstration footage of the Reaper, we got to see it in existing areas. You know, it might seem like a great opportunity for these streams to just be constantly showing off new Heart of Thorn stuff, but I actually really liked seeing a Reaper, something so new, running around in areas of ore in various places that Robert was demonstrating a couple of the builds. And also, there has been some word, supposedly, people are seeing in the background, LA looks a little bit different. Maybe we'll be seeing a rebuilding coming soon, like there's scaffolding and stuff in the background, but we shall have to see. Last thing as well before we move into Reaper stuff, they did say that next week is the break. So we've had 3 Elite Specializations. There will not be one revealed next week. However, don't be too sad about that. They say that it's for a very good reason, that they're going to do something extra special. Ruby mentioned it was going to be extra special quite enthusiastically at the end of the regular stream. Then she mentioned it again after PvP 101. So what could this be? I think one of the main big features we still haven't heard much about for Heart of Thorns is, of course, guild halls, right? So maybe next week we'll get some information on guild halls or some other big feature. I doubt they're going to pull the rug out from under us and announce, oh, look, this is what we're doing for raids or whatever. I think we'll probably see something on that. But yeah, I'll be covering that. Of course, it'll be nice to take a bit of a break from here, talking about classes that ultimately I don't main. Anyway, so let's move on. Let's talk about general Necromancer stuff. This is awesome! So you guys will know I did a Boots Bad build on the idea of vampirism. I really like the idea. I loved the old touch ranges in the first game. I love the idea of giving Necromancer that bruisery playstyle, which is ultimately one of the things Reaper's supposed to be good at, but it's never really worked. Vampirism's been held back in many ways. One of the main reasons it's not worked is because when you lifesteal, if you're in Death Shroud, it doesn't actually do anything. You're not being healed under the Death Shroud. This has always sucked, and it's one of those scenarios where it's kind of like ArenaNet through implementation have got a build that encourages you to not use your F1 or your main profession mechanic. Well, that is changing. Robert slipped that in there right at the end, that there are more changes to Blood Magic than we even heard on the 4-hour stream they did before, and Blood Magic, all health-stealing vampirism stuff, will actually heal your regular health while you are in Death Shroud. He even showed off a Reaper build that was a Blood Magic Reaper, running around in the new Reaper Shroud, gaining a bunch of health and getting a lot of cool sustains. So that's really cool, makes the build far more viable. Even better than that, he discussed the fact that there will be a new trait coming to Blood Magic, which is a Vampiric Aura. This aura will apply to your allies, allowing them also to siphon health, so it's kind of adding the supporty element to the Necromancer. He did specifically, and I very much agree with what he said, say that they want to let Necromancers feel that more supportish role because they are such a selfish class right now. However, they don't want to do that through just giving them a bunch of stuff other people already have, you know, like giving them he specifically said fire fields and a ton of blast finishes, and it's true, you know, this would be something people would like, but that's kind of lazy, and that's not what the Necromancer is, so they're trying to support it in necromantic ways, which I do very much agree with. So yeah, that's going to be a new aura, and in theory, perhaps, if this is enough life siphon across all 5 people, we may see people actually run this, because at the end of the day, it is extra damage on top of regular damage people are doing. Whether it's a lot, though, we'll have to hold our breath. And then finally, something even better, he talked about how life transfer, the skill 4 in Death Shroud, or in Reaper Shroud also, which is incredibly strong, and you guys will see some footage of, is actually when you trait for it. There's a trait currently that means it heals allies, which no one really enjoys. Well, now also, this will not just heal allies, but it will res allies too. And if this scales off of healing power, well, this is going to be incredible. So that's very exciting to me. I love the idea of you being able to run in there, especially on the Reaper form, pop the 4, do massive damage, huge cleave to enemies around you, and you're actually bringing your allies up as well. You know, it's like counter-cleaving foes who are crowding around one of your allies' bodies in PvP, trying to cleave them. It's just going to be great. So anyway, that's not even really Reaper stuff. That's just changes to blood magic. And again, I like the thought that, you know, so many things, little things like this, have already changed and been elaborated on and can be added. Even the existence of a whole new trait, an idea for a trait, the Vampiric Aura. So, you know, a lot of what we saw in that 4-hour live stream maybe could be changing in other lines too, which I'd like, because as I said, I do feel like when you really look, like if you look at the miners in death magic and a lot of the necromancer stuff, it just seems not fun. So yeah. Let's move on to the Reaper. Traits for this class were pretty cool, actually. Obviously, we got like a top row of traits we can choose, a middle row of traits we can choose, and a bottom row of traits we can choose, all within the Reaper line. And they're actually each themed now. I think they've probably been trying to do this with other classes, except when it comes to the initial trait lines or specializations that were already in the game, it can be really hard to pull it off, but they've done it very well for the Reaper. So they kind of describe here that the bottom line, Robert specifically said, is kind of like a monster movie kind of line. This is your flat damage, gap closing, vicious, aggressive, dangerous melee fighter that you're terrified of, that keeps you in close. The middle line is kind of your very cold, chill-based line, which augments chill in many ways I'll describe in a second. And the top line too is kind of more of a sustainy style thing. It's more of a brawlerish line, and it's got lots of sustain. So you can kind of go flat, top, middle, or bottom. But then there are also tons of different combos and variations you can proc out of there that Robert described. Like one trait might be giving you boons, and then those boons are giving you other things, or maybe you want to dip around depending on how many shouts you're running. It does all look very convincing and really, really well designed. I love the Reaper trait line, and I loved the Dragon Hunter stuff too. This one's even trumped that. So, let's look at the traits themselves. The Adept. We have a choice of shouts cool down faster for more foes that are hit. So this isn't like a flat, oh, your shouts just recharge faster, as we see everywhere else. There's actually more to it than that, and it's because all your shouts are actually hitting enemies, the more of them that it hits, the faster the cooldown goes down. So there is more play to it, which I like. You know, they can afford to have these things more complicated because they are ultimately things that can be unlocking at level 80, and this is exactly where they can expand. Or you can take crits against chilled foes will cause an explosion that then once again chills foes. This trait sounds awesome. We even see some demonstration of it being used in some of Robert's builds, and it kind of ties into this idea with the Reaper. They have a lot of chill, guys. They even have chill on their auto attack on the Greatsword, which I'll get to very soon. But it comes into the idea that once you get that initial snare off, and the Reaper is behind you and he's managed to chill you that first time, it could be really hard to get away because he's going to proc it again, and it's kind of like once he's got you in his grasp, it's hard to worm your way out before he delivers some big execution strike. So probably my favorite of this slot. And the last trait that you can choose is one of these traits that will reduce the duration of movement impairing conditions. And this one's really powerful, incredibly powerful. It's 33% base, which is what most classes enjoy. And this one will actually then become 66% while you are in Reaper Shroud. So this is really needed, obviously, for this class to be able to keep coming slowly but surely, and being able to shrug this stuff off. You'll see stability is on this Elite Specialization as well. Again, is a really cool thing. So it's kind of like, do you want to chill people and keep them close that way, or do you want to be able to shrug off stuff that they're trying to snare you with? There's some cool little decisions to make there. So anyway, that's the Adept slot. Don't want to talk too long about this because there's so much information to get through. The Master slot has Greatsword attacks will steal health. So again, there could be some synergy for some blood magic Reapers here. But also it has a very potent effect on it that means your skill 2 on Greatsword, which is a huge hitting execution style ability, Gravedigger. This, when you land it, will actually recharge all your other skills a little bit faster. And Gravedigger itself is an attack that's AoE. So the number they give right now, and numbers we shouldn't fixate on, just the idea of things. But if you hit 5 targets with it, then that's a 15% cooldown reduction on Gravedigger. Gravedigger itself too, I'll get into a second, but can recharge itself faster from hitting low foes. So there's this idea that once the Reaper gets you low, he can keep slamming you with his Gravedigger and getting you lower and lower, and these just massive chunks start coming down. Very exciting style of play. The next choice you've got in the Master slot, it goes up against striking a chilled foe will grant you might and life force, and with the amount of chill available, this is very strong, can even sustain you then in Reaper Shroud for a very long time too, because you're gaining life force. Or lastly, If you strike a foe with vulnerability, you will increase your crit chance based on the amount of stacks of vulnerability they have. And each stack is worth 2% crit chance. So, let's take it to the extreme. They can have 25 vulnerability on their foe. That means you have a flat 50% chance to crit. That is huge. That is massive. Consider as well, another one of the Necromancer traits you can take, a Grandmaster trait, gives you 50% crit chance while you are in Death Shroud or Reaper Shroud. So, you can, in theory, with this trait and 25 vuln on a foe, which you can contribute an awful lot of to yourself as a Reaper because they have vulnerability on many of their skills, you can actually have 100% crit chance without building any precision into your gear at all. That opens up some gear sets, perhaps, in some modes, that we don't see currently ran too much, like Cavalier or Valkyrie gear, that have the power, have the ferocity, and you can just ignore the precision and go for something else. Really cool thoughts. Obviously, you're not going to have it all the time, but very, very, very potent. Finally, let's look at the Grandmaster slot. These are going to be the big ones that really define our builds. You've got Blighter's Boon. This will give you life force whenever you gain a boon, or health if you were in Reaper's Shroud. So that's a nice little twist, actually, that, again, this is a way to heal yourself up while you're in Reaper's Shroud. And again, that might not sound so powerful or interesting, but then think about the Master slot trait we just had, where whenever you chill a foe, you gain might and life force. So they kind of combo together, because might is a boon. So you would chill a foe, gain might, then you would gain even further life force based on the fact that you just gave yourself might. And because a lot of this stuff cleaves massively, these are all AoE procs that just stack upon one another. The Reaper really does excel when a lot of people are around them, compared to in just sort of 1v1 kind of scenarios. And that's exciting for PvP specifically, but I am also then worried that a lot of PvE we see right now isn't so much outnumbered fighting, or that's not the bit people care about. That's when it's 5 people just slamming into a boss, and I don't know how much that's going to cripple what the Reaper can do. Anyway, the next Grandmaster is Deathly Chill. This was actually a Guild Wars 1 Necromancer skill. It's actually a reference back to that. Supposedly, Blighter's Boon is a reference to something as well, though. That's going over my head. But Deathly Chill will make Chill deal damage, and it does additional damage when foes get below 50% health. This is awesome. This is a really, really cool trait. This is actually something before the Condi changes and the stacking intensity poison and burns and stuff. This was actually something I really wanted to see for Elementalist. I wanted to see Ellies get access to another type of damaging Condi that could really make Condi on them viable. Now, that might not be necessary anymore, and I'm certainly not sad to see that come on the Reaper, on the Necromancer, who have always had a big part of Chill be a part of them. Plus, it was always kind of hard to fit into Ellie before, because you couldn't really have a Chill trait in the Earth line, which was the Condi line, and so on. Anyway, what's important is that this is another big thing for Necromancers to maintain that role as King of Condis. They've really fallen off with that now. There are a lot of other classes that can do Condi far better than Necros can, and that's kind of been falling out of favor ever since the Doomfire change. So giving them another thing, another whole condition that no other class gets access to that they can really be damaging with, is a very positive thing. And think about this too, one of the minors for the Reaper we discussed in yesterday's video is whenever you fear someone, you also apply Chill. Well, there's also the Terror trait, right? So you can have Terrormancers who fear someone, do damage on the fear, do damage on the Chill, and have their other rolling Condis going at the same time. Man, suddenly the loss of Doomfire when it was just randomly applying it on crits, which is a change I've always agreed of, doesn't seem so scary. In fact, could you, in theory, run a Necro build that has Burning, Chill damage, fear damage, poison, bleeds, and torment? Is that a thing? I'm not saying it would be a good build, but it's an interesting thought that they'd have access to such a wide variety of damaging Condis. The only one they'd miss is what? Confusion? Runes of Perplexity? Anyone? Anyway, now suddenly the spike on the TP about sigils that increase chill duration? Deathly Chill, very cool. And finally, the last Grandmaster, Reaper's Onslaught. Again, this is kind of the monster one. This allows you to attack faster while in Reaper's Shroud, 15%, and these are very, very potent traits, the attack speed traits. And it also allows your Reaper Shroud 2, which is a big gap-closing, spinning Necrocopter attack. We'll have a look at it in a second. This will actually recharge that every time you kill someone. So taking this Grandmaster, you become like this unstoppable monster that slays someone and then goes zooming into the next, slays them, goes zooming into the next, just sort of propelling himself around, which is a really, really cool Grandmaster. So again, I love the traits. I love the ordering of the traits. I like the thought that there are both Condi and power-based builds viable, and there seems to be a lot of utility here. Very necromantic. I very much enjoy it. So, after that, on the stream, we had a look at the Greatsword skills. You guys should have seen a fair amount of this on the video already. The auto attack rolls through 2 skills, as many autos do. It goes Dusk Strike, Fading Twilight, Chilling Scythe. Dusk Strike and Fading Twilight are the same, but they cleave 3 targets and they just do damage, while Chilling Scythe applies quite a lot of chill. Enough chill, actually, that even without augmenting it further, like through sigils and Condi duration, just from auto-attacking, if all you ever did was purely auto-attack, you would maintain chill on the foe. That can sound OP. I've seen some people saying, oh, this is completely OP, but actually, I think in a lot of situations, you're not gonna want to just sit there auto-attacking all the time. They are slow hits. It is the last one on the chain. Missing attacks can mess this up, you know, so I actually think this isn't as strong as it sounds, but chill on an auto attack is, of course, something very notable, and even Robert said, look, we try and avoid big CC-ish stuff like this on autos. The only place, I think he's right, the only place that we've seen that before is Cripple on the Warrior Sword auto. It was also specified that the auto on this Greatsword is slower than the auto attack on other professions. This feels more like a hammer, really, if you were on a Guardian. So moving on, we've got the skill 2. Now, this is Grave Digger. This is what looks like one of the core skills that Reapers will be using. It's a huge swing. It does massive damage. It's kind of like a giant Executioner ability. And I say Executioner because it actually recharges much faster if you hit a low foe or someone who is in down state. It also happens to be a whirl finisher. It also cleaves, and to get this benefit, the recharging benefit, it only actually has to hit one person with that cleave who is that low. So if there's a downstate body and lots of people are trying to res it, and they're all at 100% health, it doesn't matter because you're hitting the downstate body as well. It's still giving you that quicker recharge. And there's this big idea with this skill where it's like you can grind people down with it when they get low on health. And again, earlier I did talk about a trait which does affect this. Will mean whenever you hit it, it doesn't just recharge itself faster, but for everyone it hits, it recharges all your other Greatsword skills faster too. Skill 3 is called Death Spiral. This actually hits 6 times very, very quickly, and this does have its uses. It means that you can break through stuff like Arcane Shields, or Guardian Focus 5s, or proc a lot of on-crit traits, you know, if you were ever to run the Sigil of Nullification, if they ever make it good, stuff like that. So, this is actually 6 hits. Each of those hits applies 2 vulnerability, so you put 12 vuln on someone just on the skill 3. So imagine you would prep someone for a big hit with the skill 3, then you'd slam down on them with a Grave Digger, for example. You also get a whole ton of life force from this ability, and again, it is a cleaving skill, so if you hit lots of people, it's way loads of life force and gets you straight into Reaper Shroud very quickly. The skill itself does have lower damage. It's more of like a setup skill. Next skill, skill 4, it's called Nightfall. Yay, Nightfall, obviously a big reference there. That's the name of one of the main campaigns for the first game. This, actually, the footage you're seeing of Nightfall, it is now slower than it, I believe this is what they said, that it's slower now than it was when the video was recorded, but it does hit harder. Now, what Nightfall does is it calls down a column of shadows, and they will damage foes, so it's like a point-blank AoE that ticks a few times. It's a dark field, so the whirls we've been hearing about, and other finishers, we've got a leap on our Reaper Shroud, will actually be comboing with it, allowing you to lifesteal a bit more, and it also causes blind to foes. People were specifically wondering, can we move while using this? You can't, so this is going to feel a lot like Guardian Greatsword 4, or specifically, we heard the Greatsword 3 on Mesmer. So you stop, you slam your sword into the ground, and then you can start moving again. This skill really shines when you look at the skill 5, which is called Reaper's Grasp. Reaper's Grasp sends out these claws that we saw in the initial trailer. These poison foes and do damage to them, and then they drag them all into you. Actually, the description says that these are scythes that you're rolling out and then dragging back with your foes, like, wrapped up in them. So you can pull them out and then drop Nightfall, or maybe you could drop Nightfall first and then pull them into it. Very similar, again, in my mind, to Guardians on Greatswords. You know, they've got their symbol that they drop, and then they can pull people in with a Greatsword 5. It's kind of similar here. And that's the Greatsword. I actually find the comparison between this Greatsword to the Guardian Greatsword really valuable. One thing that's kind of boring about Guardian Greatsword, at least, is a lot of the abilities have very high cooldowns, and it becomes kind of rotationary while you're playing on that weapon set. You know, I talked to Matt Visual a lot. He mains Guardian. He tends to find, you know, especially in PvE, he gets into this kind of rotationary mindset, and it's not that engaging to play. You'll notice, though, that the Reaper, though it has similar skills in some ways, actually a lot of the cooldowns are very short. And it has additional ways through this trait and Grave Digger to actually drop those cooldowns even further, which I actually kind of like. You know, maybe it can afford the lower cooldowns because a lot of its attacks are a lot slower and more clunky and more precise, which means there's going to be a higher skill cap to it, not in terms of just landing your abilities, but also the fact many of your cooldowns are up. There's much more frequently a decision as to which ability you want to use when. You're not waiting on cooldowns so much, and the whole play style of it, in theory, could be a lot less rotation-y, and that's what I quite like about the design of the Greatsword from what I've seen so far. So, for the other Elite Specializations, that was kind of it for, you know, the left-hand side of our skill bars, but don't forget we do also have Reaper Shroud on the Reaper, so there are another 5 skills we can look at, which I will try to go through fast. There's actually a video out on MMORPG's YouTube channel. It's like a 4-second video of just the Reaper in Lion's Arch toggling into Death Shroud, just so we can see the animation. It actually changes the saturation of the screen, which I think does Death Shroud do this as well, but it really is a quite cool animation. You get a friggin' huge scythe. Let's see what we can do with it. First, you've got the auto attack. This, again, cycles through 3 abilities. There's Life Rend, Life Slash, and Life Reap. Now, the first 2 cleave 3 targets. The last one cleaves 5. This is an auto, so it will gain the benefit of existing Necromancer traits. You can trait this to apply Burning. For example, you can trait this to apply Vulnerability to foes. Now, the interesting thing about the auto here is for Death Shroud, you have one ability, Life Transfer, that kind of allows you to maintain yourself in Death Shroud. This is the skill 4 in Death Shroud, and you push this, and this gives you your Life Force back. On the Reaper, that's now the auto attack instead. So this is the ability you're going to use to try and maintain yourself. If you're getting a lot of these AoE procs and hitting a lot of foes, actually this will let you stay in the form for a long time. And in fact, in the footage, you'll see he's just auto attacking golems, and that's enough to sustain himself forever in Reaper Shroud because there's so many targets. This ability also, the Scythe, you're wielding a scythe here, no longer your Greatsword. This is a bit faster, especially when you trait, of course, for an extra 15%. This isn't going to be so slow and weighty, particularly on the auto, but the other stuff still fits that idea. Moving on to the skill 2, this was previously a blink that applied poison. Now it is a rush, and this is the Necrocopter skill. This is, you spin the scythe out in front of you, you hit a ton of people as you're moving in. It was described as being very similar to Burning Speed, so if you yourself are crippled or chilled somehow, and then you were to use this ability, you would hit people a lot. Kind of cool thought. I actually wish that Necromancers had a corruption that put a movement impairing Condi on them, but I don't think they do they? Get some massive numbers out of this thing. Death's Charge, this is the ability that the Grandmaster will instantly recharge after you kill a foe. It counts as a leap finisher, so if you just use Nightfall, then you can of course combo out of that, or if you've got drop to Chill Field, which we'll talk about in a second, you can combo off of that as well. It already has a low recharge, so you can use it to keep close quite well anyway, but then with that Grandmaster as well, instantly recharging if you manage to kill someone. Yeah, this can be kind of exciting to bounce around from weak foe to weak foe to weak foe in PvE, at least. The skill 3, this was Doom before. It was ranged, instant activation, Fear, one of the most widely used Fear, because every Necromancer ever always had it, and you could combo it with the previous skill 5 in Death Shroud. Well, this, once again, is a Fear, but it works a little bit differently. First of all, it's not ranged. Instead, it's actually an ability that gives you stab. So stability is incredibly important for the Reaper. We've got the trait that helps us shrug off those Condis coming in that will impair our movement, but stability is super important too. But this means whenever you go into Reaper Shroud, just as currently you have kind of that muscle memory of toggling into Death Shroud and then probably wanting to fear someone right away, now you kind of got that very similar thing, except it's the opposite. You're getting yourself stabbed. But the really nice part is you can choose to shatter that stability and fear people who are very close to you. So it is now AoE, but not ranged, and it comes out of this kind of toggling stab thing for you as the Reaper, so you can get close. So that's really awesome, and they even said as well that you can pop the stab in Reaper, and then you can come back out of Reaper and you'll have the stab for your regular skills, like your Greatsword abilities. So that's really cool. Love this skill. Skill 4, this is Soul Spiral. This is a really basic ability. This, you spin around a whole ton and just do a butt ton of damage. Robert said it was spin to win, and I pretty much agree with that from what we can see. This is replacing Life Transfer. It hits way harder than Life Transfer. You know, you got that classic thing of Necromancers think they're doing tons of damage because they toggle into Death Shroud and they pop the skill 4 and they're like, yeah, look at all these amazing numbers I'm getting. When really they're not doing amazing numbers. But now, in Reaper form, that it could actually be true. I think that's the idea anyway. You want to go into Reaper form, you spin this thing, do a ton of damage. Then it also has the further synergy with the blood magic changes we were talking earlier, where you can trait this thing to res your allies while you're doing this incredible swirling damage thing. Very dervishy, friggin' awesome, and it's a world finisher. So again, we've got more sustain coming as we maybe leech life or apply a ton of chilling bolts, again keeping people close to you. Last but not least, we have the skill 5, Executioner's Strike. This was a staple Guild Wars 1 ability for Axe Warriors. This was a huge hitting axe attack. In this game, it comes back. It's a high cooldown, massive execution ability. So the Reaper actually kind of gets 2 of these. They get Gravedigger to keep grinding people down who are below 50% health, and they also get Executioner Strike, this massive wombo hit. If it feels as satisfying as Executioner Strike in GW1 did, my god. So the idea here is it does more damage to foes who are below 50%, and even more damage to people below 25%. Think again about existing Necromancer traits like Close to Death. That's a huge damage modifier, really cool, and even beyond this, it drops a chill field that you can then proc a bunch of combos out of that last for 5 seconds, an awful lot like Water 4 on Staff for Elementalist. This also stuns the foe, so it's just a huge hit, really exciting, and I love the name for it. For what it's worth, there was another Guild Wars 1 reference in the new Death Shroud as well, Reaper Shroud. Death's Charge, the skills 2 that moves you very quickly. Death Shard was an assassin skill in the first game, one of the most popular Shadow Step engagement abilities. So there's all these little references flying around, and maybe you guys caught them. So, there you go, that's the new Death Shroud. You can hopefully see how you would toggle into it, give yourself stab, maybe stay there for an Executioner Strike, drop back out, use more of your Greatsword stuff, drag people back down with your Greatsword. It's the raw amount of might you're getting if you're in AoE scenarios. Very cool. So far, everything I've said to you guys, I really enjoy about the Reaper, and I think it's awesome. Then we have Shouts. Shouts are the utilities. Shouts are pretty cool. That's what I'll say about them. I think they seem a little lackluster. You guys will have to see what you think as I go through them in a second. Some people have been actually pointing out to me some of the Ranger Shouts have had cast times. Well, the Necromancer Shouts, or the Reaper Shouts, all have cast times 2. They are all, as far as I could tell, 600 range, so none of this like really close range spiky shout that you scream in someone's ear, which I really like the thought of. I even saw a comment from someone yesterday talking about the idea of a Reaper Shout that was like an evil laugh, and it does like 3 different effects, and the first effect is while you're going and it gets more potent as the Reaper starts laughing louder and louder and louder. But so there's none of that kind of stuff. There are cast times. There is of course the trait so that will cool them all down quicker. Do you remember that with all of these that I'm about to tell you? And in general, all of the shouts follow this theme of they are much better if you hit a lot of foes. I will also say one thing I predicted that could have been a thing for the Reaper was a taunt shout. I didn't think we'd get a fear shout. I thought we'd get a taunt one. Well, there is neither. There is not a taunt shout. There was actually an interview on MMORPG as well where John Peters was talking about this, and he basically just said, look, we did think about it. We thought about the idea of having taunt, but really Necromancer, Reaper, they seemed much more about fear than taunt. They are kind of like the opposite, so we decided not to. And as many of you guys said, Robert also clarified here, if you ran Trooper runes with any of these shouts, they do AoE cleanse around you regardless, again, just as we see with like On My Mark on the Warrior or any of the Ranger ones. Alright, so here we go. The first one is a heal. Has a cast time. Now, this strikes foes around you and also gives you life force at the same time. This is the only Necromancer heal that has also given you life force, but I don't see it competing too well with consume conditions unless you have another one of these shouts in a second that transfers condies, and you have a dagger offhand, and you have a staff, and you're just relying on all of that for your condi cleanse, but still, it's kind of an icky thought to me. The next one is You Are All Weaklings. This was a Guild Wars 1 skill. It was actually a non-skill that we could use, so it wasn't even really a profession thing. So this will do basically exactly as it says, and just as it did in the first game too. It applies weakness to foes around you. Weakness is incredibly strong, guys. I actually think one of the main conditions people underestimate is weakness. It doesn't just do this horrible thing with glancing blows and take away your crits and stuff, but it's actually reducing endurance regeneration as well. Again, very much helping the Reacher smash your face in. Other nice thing about this, though, is it's a stun break, and it applies might to you per target you hit. 4 might per target. So if you get the dream and you hit 5 targets with it, you get 20 might. The might doesn't last very long at all, but I suppose if you were against some kind of a zoo-ish character, you know, a turret NG or something in PvP, then suddenly having 20 might to quickly Reaper Shroud and Executioner Strike someone would be pretty cool. But again, it is very, very short duration, so don't look too positively at that. Another little cool thing too is it's a stun break with a cast time. don't see this much, so the way they're actually dealing with this is it's like, I believe Stomp for the warrior is the same. Let's say you are stunned, you pop it, it will immediately break the stun, start the cast, and it gives you stability to help you get through that cast without another CC coming in. So that's why you see stability on that skill too. Does a lot of stuff, but really weakness and might for you. Next one is called Suffer. Suffer is shown in this, the tooltip says it's a stun break. It's actually not, they said. Now this is the one that transfers conditions on you to your target, and so this has some synergy with existing corruption skills and may give you some room to not run consume condition. This also chills though, and obviously that's really important for Reaper. You get that initial chill on, then your trait starts proccing, exploding more chill, and just so on and so on. And actually again, this is AoE, so even though it just says like one condition, you can actually Condi cleanse 5 conditions very quickly as long as you just hit targets with it. And because it's not like a projectile, there's no travel time, there's no chance of reflecting it and stuff, it could be easier to land than you think. The next shout is Nothing Can Save You. Now, this will damage foes, just like all the others, but it will actually rip boons off of your target. So you can rip a few, and it applies vulnerability to foes that had boons ripped from them. So the idea is, you know, your defenses, you're against someone with protection or something, you can pop this thing, and suddenly nothing can save them. Particularly consider that this skill also makes you unblockable, and it scales a lot longer for the amount of foes that you hit. So you see the theme here. So becoming just raw unblockable, and for the duration if it hits 5 target, is very, very, very strong. Suddenly they have less boons, and they can't, like, even, like, say you're against a guardian, he can't even shelter to get away from you, you just keep slamming against him. Also remember that there is a trait that gives you increased crit chance against vulnerable foes for the amount of stacks they have. So again, this has great synergy, and you might want to run both of those together. Next shout is Rise. This is the one we saw in the trailer. I really don't have too much to say about it. This is the one that damages foes and summons Jagged Horrors for every foe that you hit. There was mention that they have specifically been looking at whether it should be a different type of minion. Which I can agree with. Again, I think Jagged Horrors are really weak, but again, also in the stream, it seemed like Jagged Horrors had been buffed somehow. There was the joke thrown around that 5 flesh golems could be a thing. Obviously, that's going to be too overpowered. I see the problem they have, though, because if you just make this bone minions, it's kind of like, why would you want to run summon bone minions instead of this? Because you can get 5 bone minions out of this shout, but just 2 from the other skill. Unless you like the idea of running both, and then you could get 7 bone minions. Now, that's pretty exciting, and that's the kind of Guild Wars 1E Minion Master style stuff. I don't know, something I like the thought. Whatever. They're looking at that, but really it's just the same as we were described to before. Lastly, we have the Elite. Lots of CCing elites we've been seeing with the Elite Specialization so far. This one is no different. Long cast time, it's 2 seconds to cast, but if you manage to pull it off, it will AoE stun everyone around you. Now, it looks like they're putting in ice blocks like Ice Bow 5. It's not. It's exactly the same as a normal stun. That's just an animation. The fact that they've done this makes me think, and the fact that they also said they were nerfing Ice Bow, makes me think they're going to get rid of the ice block on the Ice Bow, which would be sad to me because I've always really liked the flavor of Ice Bow 5 in that it's unstun breakable, but it's so hard to land. But, you know, I can't see them having both. Like, wouldn't they have thought, oh, we've got this weird animation, we don't want to confuse players. I don't know, maybe that could mean we'll see the Ice Bow 5 change. But it's a lot of chill as well, 12 seconds of chill, and you also gain resistance for every foe that you hit. Now, they're saying maybe that resistance could change. I actually think the class would work way better if that wasn't resistance, if it was instead stability. Now, I know that Necromancers in general are great manipulators of conditions, but does that have to be a big part of the Reaper too? I actually think the Reapers would much rather enjoy having stability for themselves so that they can continue to close gaps. Right now, all you'll notice we've got is the one on the Reaper Shroud 3. The shout doesn't really count, it's just covering its own cast time. So I would prefer to see this be stability, but then that does leave a big gap for the Necromancer in terms of conditions coming in on them. I don't know, maybe existing specializations. You guys can let me know what you think about that. But that's pretty much it, guys. There's the Reaper. This video has been so long. There was so much to say about it, though. I'm very happy with it in general. Shouts are a little bit meh to me, but a lot of the other stuff, I love the design of it. I don't want to get too fixated on numbers because, again, stuff can change, so what's the point? I'd love to know what you guys think. And lastly, I've got a question for you guys. On the stream, we saw this. The new hero panel, and a lot of those tabs over there look very different. I was wondering what you guys thought these were. We got a couple of new icons, but what could they be? I thought masteries were going to be coming up from the experience bar at the bottom, as we saw in the press betas we got to play. Well, what are these other things? Are they adventure related? Hero tracks? But aren't we seeing hero tracks on the main panel? I don't know. I'd love to see what you guys think. In any case, That's the Reaper live stream. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you next week for some alternate stuff, since we're going to be on perhaps needed Elite Specialization break. Thanks, guys. Catch you next time.